Canada's euthanasia laws are being brought into question by experts and advocates following multiple cases of assisted death being offered to patients in lieu of treatment. An Associated Press investigation into Canada's euthanasia rules cited concerns from human rights advocates around a lack of proper safeguards around such laws. It cited a 2019 case in which a Canadian man with a history of depression and other non-life-threatening issues was euthanized, despite concerns from family members and a nurse practitioner. 61-year-old Alan Nichols submitted a request for assisted death under one health reason: hearing loss, according to the report. However, such cases aren't unique in Canada, which is looking into further expanding access to medical assistance in dying, or MAID. National Post columnist Tristin Hopper today released a report on the issue and has been following the backlash against what's being called the most permissive euthanasia laws in the world. In fact, Mr. Hopper joins us now. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the current regulations around medically assisted death in Canada. Why are they being called the most permissive in the world? How do they compare to other countries with similar laws?
So when this was first brought in 2016, it was only for people with terminal illnesses. So if you had, you were in pain and you were set to die in, the next few months, reasonably foreseeable was the word. And then that was struck down by a court decision. And then that resulted in the government saying, okay, now it's anybody who just has, some level of suffering. And then starting in March, we'll have MAID, so medical assistance in dying, for anybody whose only underlying condition is a mental illness. So this is sort of beyond what makes it more permissive than a place like, say, Belgium or the Netherlands, is that sort of psychiatric angle that you can have euthanasia for basically just a mental health condition, and also who's prescribing it. So we allow it, just a nurse practitioner can sort of greenlight the process. And I think there's more stringent safeguards in not a lot of countries actually have assisted death anywhere, but the other ones who do generally have more safeguards in Canada.
And the major concern around all of this from the UN, disability rights advocates, even psychiatric professionals, is that MAID might be offered to patients rather than required treatment. So just how prominent of an issue is this in Canada already?
So in the last year, we had about 10,000 MAID deaths in Canada, which was a 30% rise over the year before. So there's no reason to believe that most of those aren't who you would want to be taking MAID. These are people who just, they want to check out early. They've got some chronic condition. They want to alleviate the last 2 months of suffering, which is the whole point. But what we're seeing every few days, almost at this point, is a case in which someone was sort of looking over their treatment options, didn't have a terminal illness, and then a healthcare practitioner said, "Hey, have you considered medical assistance in dying?" So the most recent case, this was actually out of Global News. They spoke to the family of a Canadian Armed Forces veteran suffering from PTSD and traumatic brain injury, who was was starting to sort of get better, was on a recovery process, and then approached Veterans Affairs Canada and said, "Well, what services do you have for someone like me?" And then in the process of that consultation, someone mentioned, "Hey, have you considered, basically lethal injection?" There's been enough of these cases that it's apparently happening much more often than anybody would have liked, in which you have people who are otherwise quite healthy seeking treatment within the healthcare system and are being offered, maybe not exclusively, but are saying, "Hey, have you considered assisted death?" And it's particularly troubling when, like someone with PTSD, you're talking about patients who already have suicidal ideation, and the healthcare system is saying, "Have you considered suicide?"
Now, this is even before MAID is going to be expanding to include mental illness in March 2023. So what kind of changes are human rights advocates calling for in terms of safeguards and regulations around this law? Just about 45 seconds left here.
It's sort of hard. When this was first brought in a few years ago, there were sources from Belgium and the Netherlands saying, like, once you sort of open this Pandora's box, there's only so far you can go with the safeguards. But I think most Canadians would say we should probably have a system in which this is never offered as sort of a basket of treatment options. And this is, it's much harder to get approved than just one nurse practitioner saying it's okay for someone with clear mental health challenges.
Lots to keep our eyes on as the situation develops. Mr. Hopper, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thank you.